PhD, how many of you didn't actually have, you know, the kind of, let me put it, how many of you are in the sciences? That'll be a lot easier. How many in the sciences? Because this is mixed, right, Sister Damia? Science and arts, right?
Yes, Prof.
Okay.
Mix.
Mix. And how many of you have started teaching research methodology? Maybe in the chat box, yes. Oh, dentistry, okay, I call. I'm not sure about other discipline, but in dentistry, do you have, you know, the kind of theoretical framework that we have in the social sciences? Economics. Okay. Now, the thing is this. Okay. In health communication, health promotion, all right. Okay. I think one of the challenging things to teach postgraduate students and also master students especially, at least postgraduate PhD student, they have gone through their masters, so it's not too bad for them. But for the master students, you know, theoretical framework is something which is not so simple for them to understand. And you know, I think one of the problems for this is that because when you read the materials on the internet, you know, you'll find all sorts of explanation, and you'll find, you know, many different ways to conceptualize a theoretical framework, a conceptual framework, and that makes it very difficult for students. Okay, so this presentation today is actually to share with you some of the things I think that we have to highlight to our students, our postgraduate students, so that they are a bit aware about, you know, the different perceptions about theoretical framework and conceptual framework, how to start, and how to develop. All right. So I will share my slides. Okay. How to guide students to develop theoretical and conceptual framework. So as I go along, there will be, I shall touch on different explanations about what a theoretical framework is, what conceptual framework is, so that, you know, I think in this way, we can guide our students better. All right, so this is something which we all, when teaching research methodology, we come across. All right, many students actually, even when we are not teaching research methodology, when they come to us for their research component, either it's a directed research, it's a dissertation, or it's a thesis, they all struggle with their theoretical and conceptual framework. They have an idea about what they want to do. They have an idea about what they want to do, but they're not quite sure, you know, how to frame it, you know, what kind of theories that they have to select and all that. And I find myself actually telling the students that you have not read enough. Every time that situation comes along, I keep telling them that you have not read enough, you know, because I think if the student has read enough, then the student will know what the concepts are, the definitions of the concepts that they are interested in. how those concepts or constructs are measured and things like that, and what are some of the theoretical framework that has been utilized in the different research and so on. Okay, so there could be a number of possibilities why these students struggle. Okay, number one, it could be that they have not encountered it directly for their undergraduate studies, because very rarely in the undergraduate studies we talk about a theoretical or a conceptual framework. We talk to them about what the variables that they're interested to study, and what are the relationships between the variables. For a master's degree also, it's possible that, they're talking about variables rather than they're talking about a theoretical framework. And second, as I mentioned earlier, there are many different explanations, and some of these, some of the information that you read on the internet, it says, the conceptual framework comes first. Some says the theoretical framework comes first, and some say, can we have one without the other, and so on. So next issue would be related to quantitative and qualitative research. The theoretical and conceptual framework, are they similar? All right. Do you require for a qualitative research? And then lab-based, science-based research, if you're talking about research in the lab, where does the theoretical framework or conceptual framework come in? All right. And then some students are not familiar, not quite sure what are the differences between literature review, theoretical and conceptual framework, so these are some of the other things that we have to tackle as lecturers. And then at the end, how do you present the theoretical framework plus the conceptual framework? Do you have them separately? That means that you have your theoretical framework first and then you have your conceptual framework, or do you present them as a combination, having both, So so these are some of the issues that students actually struggle with, and if they are your supervisees, then that's makes things a lot simpler, because you can tell them that I prefer it this way. I would like you to combine actually of your theoretical framework and conceptual framework first, and so on. But when you dealing with students whom other people are supervising, you're not quite sure what the approach is for the supervisor. All right. Okay. So I think the starting point for all of this, when we talk about the theoretical framework, I think the starting point should be is that we should talk about the 4 branches of philosophy. Right? We should talk about the 4 branches of philosophy, and we have to talk about research paradigms. Now, research paradigms, I'm not quite sure whether all of you are familiar with the research, the research paradigm, the different research paradigm, because what happens is that when we work in one discipline, we tend to adopt one type of paradigm, one type of research paradigm. Therefore, we are not too concerned about other types of research paradigms, because it just does not affect us in our research. So, and these research paradigms actually is very much rooted in the branches of philosophy. Okay, branches of philosophy. So this is where I'm going to start. All right. So if you look at this diagram here, or not diagram, this graphic here, you'll find that, the methods that you use for your research and the methodology is based on the theory and philosophical foundations. At the bottom of it is the philosophical foundations that you adopt, for your research. Okay. And I actually checked the schedule, and I wanted to see whether any of this have been tackled in any of the sessions. I don't see it as a topic. So if I'm talking about it again, then I apologize, but I don't see this as one of the topics that have been presented in this supervisor training program. So So when we talk about philosophy and the branches of philosophy, different authors have different classifications. They touch on different things, but basically there are 4 things or 5 things that will always come up. All right. Number one is what we call metaphysics. When we talk about metaphysics, meta comes from the word beyond. It's a Greek word that means beyond, and physics has to do with nature. So anything that is beyond something which is an observable nature, something that deals with ghaib, things that you don't see. All right. So that's metaphysics. Um, so the philosophical question would be, what is the ultimate nature of reality, and what is real, what exists and what actually does not exist. Sometimes when you watch, when we watch the movie Matrix, then you start to wonder whether your life is real or not, or whether you're in some, some sort of some world that has been construed. All right. So along with metaphysics come the idea of ontology. So ontology is about reality. What does it mean? How do we define reality? So how do we define existence? What counts as existence, reality, being and becoming, and so on, So so this is a very important issue when we are talking about, say, for example, like our existence, the existence of the human being. Now, how did we exist? So that is an important question. Did we evolve? Like the theory of evolution, did we evolve? Or did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us and placed us on this earth? So the branch of philosophy that deals with this kind of questions is what we call ontology. Now, the next one is epistemology. Now, epistemology is a study of knowledge. So it talks about what kind of knowledge, how do we come to know about knowledge? How do we know what we know? All right. What counts as knowledge? So these are things that we talk about when we talk about epistemology. My background is not in philosophy, so I'm not going to go very in depth into all these things. It's just that I want to show you how it actually relates to the kind of research paradigm that we are using. And this is something that I think students actually really struggle with. They struggle with the research paradigm, and they even struggle even more with these branches of philosophy. Then we talk about axiology. Axiology is about value. All right. What would be considered right or wrong? What would be considered as good or bad? What is acceptable? What is not acceptable? It talks about values. And then we have logic. Logic is reasoning. What can be counted as logical, right? So if you make a claim and you support your claim, so therefore, that is logic in itself. All right. So you can argue your position by giving some explanation that would support your position. So this axiology, I forgot to mention that axiology also talk about ethics and about issues of right and wrong, responsibility, standards of conduct, and also about aesthetics. Okay, so these are the 4 branches of philosophy. Because all these things, how you view existence, how you view nature, how you think that you get to know about knowledge will be very different for different people who adopt a different understanding of it. It's like the 6 blind men of Hindustan that, when they think that the elephant is like a wall or the elephant is like a spear, and so on and so forth. So this is the very basis of our research paradigm. All right. So this is the first thing. So I think when we teach our students about theoretical framework, about our conceptual framework, I think this is where we have to begin. This is where we have to begin. We have to get them to understand, all right, these concepts. So, so, because the thing is that, if you look at research in the West and research in the Muslim world, ontology plays a very, very important role, because as Muslims, we do not accept the theory of evolution. Okay, because the theory of evolution says that it starts with the Big Bang, not that Charles Darwin mentioned it in the beginning, but scientists now are saying that, it all started with the Big Bang, and then things just evolve. All right, things just evolve from the very simple life forms, and it becomes into a very complex life forms such as ourselves. So if we don't hold this view, so therefore the kind of research that we do will not go anywhere near the explanations of the theory of evolution. All right, so so this is why understanding about these things are important for the students, so that they their research is coherent. It's not like, the philosophical basis is this, but the methodology is something else, and the theoretical framework does not reflect the philosophy, and so on and so forth. Okay, so as I mentioned just now about epistemology, about the theory of knowledge, how do we know things? And I think as Muslims, we accept that knowledge belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Knowledge is taught to us. We therefore do not create knowledge, but we discover knowledge. I think in the sciences also, when you talk about astronomy and things like that, they also talk about discovering. They say discover, the frontiers of space or whatever it is. They don't say create, because it's already there. So I mentioned about physiology already. So maybe a very small example that I like to give that I think we can make our students aware is that, we can look at all these 4 branches of philosophy. We can look at it from Islamic perspective. And then we can look at it from the Western atheist perspective, because Western Christian may be quite similar to us, but definitely Western atheism is quite different. Okay, so from the Islamic perspective, in terms of metaphysics and ontology, we believe about Malaika, we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though we don't see any of these things, and we believe that Allah is the creator of the of everything. But from the atheist perspective, it started with the Big Bang, and then the theory of evolution, and so on and so forth. And in terms of knowledge, how do we know? All knowledge is created by and belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we are inspired sometimes to know something, but for the atheists or the West, most of the Western perspective is through scientific observations, and only what can be observed by man can be counted as science. Right, so anything else that cannot be observed, therefore, is not science. I think if you look at the definition of science, you come across that. Of course, our values are governed by our Islamic Sharia. It remains unchanged from time to time. But moral ethics from the Western perspective can change. It can be determined by society. It changes from time to time. For example, in the past, LGBT is not acceptable, but now LGBT is, same-sex marriage, and so on and so forth. And then in terms of logic, as long as for the Western perspective, as long as the argument can be supported, that is acceptable. But for us, logic must have proper support, but it cannot contradict our Islamic Sharia, our laws and values and so on. So, so all these things actually influence the way we do research, we think about things. So say, for example, like nowadays you find books about my two dads and me, or my two moms and me, because to them this is part of the human rights, that and because the basis of their ontology is actually about human evolution. Human beings evolve from the Big Bang. There is no creator. All right, so there's no creator, and therefore there is no need for religion, and we can explain everything through science. It also influence how we perceive things. For example, there are many countries nowadays. I know that Netherlands have adopted this for a very, very long time, that they do not consider drug use as being a criminal offense. But there are many states in the United States now also is adopting this. So on one hand, you can find some people saying that, by decriminalization of drug use, it does not increase drug use. But there are other people who have just the opposite point of view, that says that actually, the drug overdose rate among Black men in the US have tripled between 2015 and 2020. And you find that this is when the change in terms of law regarding drug use has been instituted in the United States. So, so depending on your perspective about value, your perspective about ontology, about your nature of existence and all these things, how you argue your point of view. So all this actually affects what kind of research we do, how do we interpret the data, how do we put our ideas across. So I think when we teach research methodology, when we teach theoretical framework, we have to start with this. Okay, so when we talk about paradigms, there are many different paradigms. I think the most common is positivism, and then we have constructivism, and then we have critical theory. We have realism. We also have post-positivist paradigm. all these things different point of view about what reality is, about how do we how do we gather knowledge, and how do we then design our methodology for our research, and then how do we interpret whatever that we find. So if you look at positivism, it says that reality, that there is only one true that there's only one truth. All right, there is one truth, and our aim is to find the truth through an objective method. Okay, through an objective method, and there's only one interpretation of the truth that is there. But when we talk about constructivism, it says that there can be multiple truth, there can be multiple realities that we have to construct. Okay, we construct with the people that we talk to, for example, in our interviews, in our observations, and so on. Okay, so you find that the common methodology that is used under constructivism is about unstructured interviews, is about participant observation, is about action research, grounded theory, and so on and so forth. So, critical theory has a slightly different approach. It says that reality is shaped by social, economic, ethnic, political, and it can change over time. All right, so this is what critical theory is all about. That it is very society driven. All right, people, it is open to how people conceptualize it, how people want it to be, and there's There's no real right and wrong, you know. So it depends on what you want. So it's so whatever that you, what kind of data that you collect would be is value mediated, meaning that, you know, it depends on the perspective of the people whom you ask. All right. So so post-positivist and realism, it's very much related to positivism, but it does have this understanding that it can be more than that. You know, it can have different interpretation, different points of view. Therefore, you have to gather information through different from different sources, through different methods, so that you can then triangulate. Okay, so so this kind of paradigm is mainly carried out, you know, the methodology that is often used with this kind of paradigm is usually qualitative in nature, where they have case studies and convergent interviews and so on and so forth. So excuse me. So you see, you may find a different definition than the one that I've shared with you, but I think it will not be very far away from what I've shared with you. Okay, so definitely positivism is something that we adopt in many of our science-based research. Yeah, when we you know, start with a theory, and we want to see whether whatever that we have found support the theory or whether it disproves the theory. So naturally we are working within the positivism paradigm. All right. Constructivism, critical theory is something when you feel that, you know, the status quo, there's something wrong with the status quo. You want to have a different perspective about it and see what other people feel about it, you know, whether a new theory can be generated and so on and so forth. Okay. All right. So we see that in research, which is a discipline inquiry, we find how the different paradigm actually would influence the kind of methodology, the research strategy that we use, the methods, okay, meaning how we collect the data and how we analyze the data that we accrue. So for example, like positivism. So positivism is you know, is data driven. It you know, we have hypothesis testing sometimes, and the method for data collection can be a survey, it can be experiments, and the analysis is usually quantitative. Okay, so critical theory, constructivism, they are more going for tick description, participant, the ideas of, you know, what participants have to say and so on and so forth. Okay, so the other thing I think when we talk about a theoretical framework is that we have to help students to understand what is a theory, what is meant by a framework, what is concept, what is a construct, what is a variable, you know. So these are some of the basic things that we have to get it clear to them, so that they can understand what should be a theoretical framework and a conceptual framework. Okay. All right, so there are lots of definitions about theory, and most of the time they are quite consistent. All right, because it says that number one is a well-established principle or a well-established observation that has been developed to explain some aspect of the natural world. So this definition of theory is quite common. It arises from repeated observation, testing, and so on and so forth. All right, so there are lots and lots of theory that are out there. So whenever our students want to do a research, one of the things that they worry about is that what theory should I use? How do I know that this is the right theory? You know, how do I know that this is the right theory? So I think number one is that they have to start with the concept first. So what's the concept that they're interested in? So if, in one of the example that I'm using is that you're talking about social distancing. What is social distancing? What is social distancing in the economics point of view? Now, we know social distancing from the pandemic point of view. we don't come together and things like that, but what is social distancing from an economic point of view? All right, so the first thing is that they got to understand the concept, and they got to know why that concept is important, and then they have to see whether that concept can be translated into a construct or a variable, and then what sort of theories actually can explain that particular concept. Okay, so and usually when we supervise students, this is the beginning of their journey, of their research journey. So I'm interested to do this. This is what they normally say. I'm interested to look at, let's say, for example, inquiry learning. Okay, so I'm interested in looking at social distance. I'm interested to look at this and this and this and this. And what happens is that after that, they expect you to tell them what those things are, I think that is one of the problems that we have with our students. So normally what I say is that, okay, now you have to read more about this. You have to know its definition. How is it defined? How do different people define these concepts? And what are the characteristics of this concept? So that's the first thing that I ask them to do. I don't ask them to find the theories first. I ask them to define find definitions of the concept first, to understand what is it that they're interested in. All right, and then only after that we go into theories that can explain that particular concept. So theories actually, maybe some students, they are not aware that theories, there are theories in almost every discipline there is. Okay, when we talk about learning theories, we talk about behaviorism, constructivism, socio-constructivism, connectivism, and so on and so forth. And when we talk about these learning theories, the things that they have to understand is that some of the theories explain certain things. Some theories explain resulted in the limitation of the theories that come before it. So they want to explain further. For example, in the beginning, in the 1960s, or even before that, scientists thought that how people learn is through repetition, through modeling, through learning, seeing what other people are doing, so that hence come the word behaviorism. And then Piaget came along and said that no, there's something that is innate in ourselves, that we construct meaning, we construct meaning. But his idea is that the construction of meaning is at the individual level. Then came along Vygotsky, and Vygotsky says that, the construction of meaning happens in a social interaction with other people. Then, from there, other theories evolve, and so on and so forth. So in marketing, consumer behavior, human development, in technology, there's also in scientific, there are also lots of scientific theories that try to explain how certain things happen. Okay, say for example, how stem cells actually how they differentiate into other types of cells. So these are all theories. So I think number one, we have to get them to understand the philosophy part of it, and then also the theories, because all these theories actually are related to the philosophy that we talk about. Okay, meaning that if you say that this is how blood cells are created, so there's only one single truth. There's no other way that blood cells can be generated, for example. Okay. All right. So so from theories, probably you can tell them that, look, when we talk about theories, there are concepts that are related to the theories. For example, when we talk about the supply and demand, I like to use this example because it's something that we are very familiar with, as consumers, we are very familiar with the supply and demand theory. So we say that, okay, so there's this theory that explain how we reach an equilibrium for supply and demand. All right. So we have this concept of supply. So what is supply and what is demand? How do we then measure supply and how do we measure demand? All right. So when we talk about theories, therefore we also have to talk about concepts, right? So and sometimes students get confused between concepts and construct. Okay, concepts and construct. So what's the difference? Concepts are abstract ideas like beauty. Beauty is a concept. Tired, tiredness, lethargic. All these are concepts. There are some concepts that are very abstract. There are some concepts that are very easily measured. For example, like length. Length is a concept. People come to agree that, long time ago, they come to agree that you can measure length by using feet and inches and then yard and so on and so forth. And then later they change it to the metric system, so it is something that people have agreed to. Okay. So you have concepts. Now, I think I need to show you this one. Okay, so perhaps you can, you can use this example to teach your students about the difference between concept, construct, and variable. So you see, if you're talking about source credibility, so source credibility, we can talk about it as a concept. We can also talk about it as a construct. All right. But a construct has a more abstract meaning to it. Okay. And construct is normally something which is not observable, something which is very abstract. But we know that source credibility can be measured by looking at a person's expertise, the person's status, objectivity. So these are three different elements, and all this can then be more directly observed through, let's say, indicators such as formal education, experience to represent expertise, job title, mode of dress to represent a person's status, and then objectivity, involvement in outcome, and so on and so forth. So all these things actually are indicators of source credibility. So source credibility is something that cannot be measured directly, but it can be measured through other concepts, and which in turn observed by, can be directly that you can measure through directly observable concepts. All right. So if you're interested in source credibility, you have to think about what are the indicators of source credibility, what are concepts that are related to source credibility. And once you get those concepts that are related, and then you have to find out how you want to measure them. What could be the observable concepts that can be related to these things? So what happens is that with us, we use the word variable to represent all of these things. All right, because someone can say that source credibility is a variable. It's a variable that you want to study in your this one. You can say that expertise is another variable, status is another variable, objectivity is another variable, and all these things are the indicators. Okay, so this is why I think sometimes students get confused. All right, because we use this term concept, construct, variable interchangeably. And there's nothing wrong to say that this is a variable. source credibility, if you want to look at the relationship between source credibility and, say, for example, sales performance, there's nothing wrong. You have two variables there. One is source credibility and the other one is sales performance. So you want to look at the relationship between that, but then how do you translate this into some things that can be measured? All right. So so I think, when we want to teach our students about, about a theoretical framework, about we have to start from the very basic and show them that, how what these things are, so that they don't get confused. Okay. All right. So sometimes so the other things that they get confused about is, what is a concept, what is a theory, so I think we have to teach them what theories are. Theories are meant to explain, to predict, so that we can understand a particular phenomenon. A theory also can explain relationships, behavior, and so on. And theories are based on some models of reality. What are things that we observe, we come up with that, explanation for it, just like the law of supply and demand. All right. So then, so these are theories. So theories are quite straightforward. All right, theories are quite straightforward. Concepts. So when we talk about anything, it can be a concept. As I said that a design is a concept. Teaching is a concept. Learning is a concept. So how do we define those concepts, right? And different people define concepts differently. For example, there are some people who define teaching at higher institution. It's not the same as teaching at schools, because the participants are different. The nature of the knowledge is different. Okay, so hence the difference in definitions of concepts. Okay. And I think one of the things that we have to get our students to understand is that there are some theories that may have changed in time due to new studies and so on and so forth. So when the students ask me, so they ask, now it's said that we must review something which is not more than 5 years, not more than 5 years. So what I tell my students is that, there are some things that were developed many years ago. Say, for example, if you talk about genetic sequencing, or, about genes and things like that, someone told me that Watson and Crick came out with those things. And if you're talking about genetic engineering, you cannot not talk about Watson and Crick, so that's not the last 5 years. So but students needs to understand that there are some theories that are still being used, they are still relevant. There are some theories that are no longer relevant, and there are some theories that were relevant in the past and still is relevant now, depending on the context. So this is the other thing that we need to teach our students. And the most important thing is that the theory that the student use actually would reflect their worldview. Say, for example, if they go for the evolution theory, if they go for evolution theory, so are you saying that no one created us, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not create us, that, you think that we have evolved, all right, from a very simple form of life into a very complex form of life? So whatever theory that we adopt, it actually depicts it actually bring across our worldview. So when we talk about theoretical framework, also we have to talk about the literature review, conceptual framework. Okay, so students also sometimes get confused with this. So what is a literature review? What's a theoretical framework? What is a conceptual framework? So we have to explain it to them. Okay, so I think this is a good way to something that I found on the internet. I think it's a very useful diagram that you can share with your students. A literature review is to find out what information that exists in our field of research. That's why, this is reading or getting to know that those information actually would help us to identify the gaps in the literature, to identify the major seminal works, to know who've been working in that field, what their perspectives are, and so on and so forth, what kind of methodologies that have been used, so that all these things can help provide a context for the research that they are doing, and also would give some sort of indication about how to show the relationship between not only variables, but previous studies and also theories. So, so the theoretical framework, as I mentioned earlier, is the foundation of the research. It describes the theories or concepts used. It gives us an insight into the beliefs and assumptions that we hold. All right. And of course, it provides a structure for how we view things. So it gives us it tells our beliefs and assumptions about certain things. So this is why we choose certain theories and not others. All right. So there are many theories out there. Why do we choose certain theories? It's because of our worldview. It's because of our beliefs. All right. The ontology, the epistemology, the reasoning that we use, for example. So I think it's a good idea to tell them what a framework is all about. Also, maybe I give them a definition of a framework so that they see how they relate. Okay, so I found this. I think it's very nice that you can use to share with your student to explain what a theoretical framework is. Okay, and I highlighting here is that a theoretical framework always starts with a definition of concepts. Because whenever that they are interested to do research in, they always start with something, with a concept that I'm interested to know about, say, education for rural women in India, for example. I want to learn about, uh, so it always starts with a concept, something that they're interested in. And most of the time, something that they're interested in is tied to the observations that they have through their reading, through their discussion with friends, and so on and so forth. And this is where we have to tell them that, you start with the concept first, define the concepts, and look at how the concept is explained, what sort of theories have been used to describe those concepts, and then look at the theories, and see which theories that you agree with, and so on and so forth. So this is a very simple way to teach students how to formulate a theoretical framework. After they've gone through the concepts, understanding the concepts, after they have identified some relevant theories, then they have to mention the proponent of the theory. So they may want to look at one single theory, or they may want to look at multiple theories. Okay, because they are looking at different things that are mentioned in the different theories that they are interested in, right? Okay. All right. So from one particular video that I watched, we start with the research paradigm and then the theories, because the research paradigm will will in a way influence what kind of theories that you're going to use, and that would also inform the methodology and so on. Okay, so for me, many students do not make the connection between the research paradigm is because they don't understand the philosophical part of it, you know. They don't understand how some students never even come across the word paradigm. Okay, what is a paradigm? What is a research paradigm? So a paradigm is a worldview, all right? It's a worldview about certain things. So what is your worldview? Do you consider that there's only one single truth? Are you saying that truth lies in many different groups of people, that the reality is different for different groups of people? Or whether you should question the reality that we have now and come up with a new reality, right? And I think this is something that the students actually have trouble with. So what happens is that they find some theories that they think is relevant, and they use that theory as part of their theoretical framework, but at the end of it, they still don't understand what a research paradigm is all about and how it relates to the branches of philosophy. Okay, so they basically don't have a point of view. They don't have a point of view because they don't even know what a research paradigm is. Okay, now for some of us, we find that, oh, maybe, you know, we don't have to teach them those things because, you know, those things are a bit complex, a bit abstract. They don't understand it. So let's just go down straight to the things that they know, talk about the different approaches, the qualitative, quantitative, the mixed method approach, and then talk about the methods that they can use, whether it's going to be a survey, whether it's going to be an experiment, you know, just talk about those things. But at the end of it, you need to get them to understand the worldview that they have, okay, in conducting that research. So this is something that I in a very simple way to explain what the theoretical framework is, okay. Okay, conceptual framework. Now, with conceptual framework, there are always in my readings, you know, there's some people who said start with a conceptual framework. There's some people who say start with a theoretical framework. When we supervise our student, I think for many of us, we tell them, okay, you do your literature review, meaning that you look at the concepts that you are interested in, you see how these concepts have been defined, and then you find some theories that are relevant to describe those concepts and to see how those concepts are related to other concepts, for example. And then once you've decided on the theory, then you look at what are the elements that you're interested in for your research, and then you develop your conceptual framework based on that. Okay. Now, there are people who say that a conceptual framework, you can either have a theoretical framework or a conceptual framework. You know, there are some people who say that, you know, you start with a conceptual framework first, and then you come up with a theoretical framework. So I think that depends on what kind of research you're doing. And if I'm not mistaken, for qualitative research, usually you start with some sort of concepts that you're interested in. For example, like you want to look at resilience. All right. So what is resilience? How do you define it? How do you see it? How do you think that it's developed, and so on and so forth? And then based on that conceptual framework that you have, you later, as you collect the data and so on, you then come up with a theory that describes how people develop resilience, for example. So of course, for some type of research, you start with a conceptual framework rather than a theoretical framework. But in some types of research, you start with a theoretical framework because you want to position whatever that you're interested in within the theory that you believe in, okay, that you think is a suitable theory. And then from there, you want to test and see whether that theory is something which can hold, or you want to, you know, look at how that theory relates to some other variables or some other constructs or some other concepts. And therefore you use multiple theories, and therefore then you see how those concepts or variables are actually related. Okay, so it depends a lot on the type of research that you are doing and how you plan to find the truth. What is truth to you? All right, it can be one single truth. It can be multiple truth based on the perception of different groups of people. So it actually depends on your research paradigm. Okay, so you see that. All right. So in this example, we have variables, you know, some theories. So I think compensation, if you look at this, you know, that we want to look at the relationship between a group of independent variables and a dependent variable. But I think when students look at this, they sometimes, it doesn't click to them that this is a concept. All right, so you have to tell them that, okay, these are, when we want to look at relationship between variables, we are actually looking at the relationship between certain concepts. So what are those concepts? How do we define? So this is why I think, you know, operational definition. Whenever we examine thesis, we find that students don't pay attention on the operational definition. You know, they're not quite sure also what sort of operational definition they have to come up with to explain a certain concept. You know, so I think if they understand what concepts are and how they can be operationalized into a variable that can be measured, then they have a better understanding about how to operationalize those concepts so that it becomes a measurable variable. All right. So I think we somehow, I don't know about you, but I somehow got through all these things, you know, through trial and error. You know, I stumbled a lot, got to know about it eventually. But I think it would be helpful if we can help our students to understand these things so that they don't make the same mistakes we make and don't spend so much time trying to figure out things, right? So I found this YouTube that I watched. It's very interesting. This person was talking about frameworks and was talking about a theoretical framework and conceptual framework, meaning that you can have either theoretical framework based on some theory that you have to explain certain things. In this example, it's the person said about using the Bourdieu's theory of practice and Vygotsky cultural historical theory to explain how children acquire cultural values. So saying that the study can be situated using this particular theoretical framework only. All right. She also explained about a conceptual framework, saying that a conceptual framework uses concepts from multiple theories to create a new framework. Okay. And I think this is something that we normally do, that PhD students normally do. All right. So they review a number of theories and they look at some of the concepts or the variables in those theories that they are interested in, and they combine, you know, some of the concepts from the different theories to create a new framework. Because PhD is about novelty. So I think for us, you know, for at least in the Kuliah of Education, the people whose thesis I have evaluated, I think we take this point of view that they have concepts that they're interested in, and they look at theories that would explain those concepts. And then they would look at the different concepts that they're interested in, and they try to create a new framework by using multiple theories. And therefore, they formulate their own conceptual framework, which they test, which they use the proper methodology to collect the data and then test that model that they have come up with. Okay, so I think this is something that many of us actually use, rather than just one theoretical framework. Rather than just one theoretical framework, you normally it's always a combination. Okay. All right. So this one I think you can read on your own. So how to begin? All right. I think this is an interesting diagram that we can use to teach our students how to situate their research paradigm, how to connect the paradigm, their conceptual framework, their theoretical framework, and the research design together. I think it's a very neat presentation. Okay, so number one, you have to identify your paradigm, whether it's going to be a positivist paradigm. Is it going to be a positivist paradigm? Is it going to be a critical theory paradigm? And then what are the concepts that they are interested in? So in this example, it's about connected learning. Okay, it's about connected learning. And the theories that are related to connected learning, one is connectivism. So it's a type of learning theory. After they talk about social constructivism, they came up with connectivism. They talk about networked learning. So here technology comes in. And then about social constructivism, meaning that you construct knowledge in a social context, by interacting with other people. So this is the theoretical framework. And then what would be the relevant design? Now, because the paradigm is an interpretivist paradigm, therefore the research design is a qualitative design, because you want to look at how different groups of people are actually viewing connected learning. What does connected learning mean to say one group of people or multiple groups of people? So therefore, you do a qualitative case study research. Okay, so that would be the research design. And the tool that you would use would be, say, for example, a semi-structured interview, some sort of mapping, or it can be an observation. It can be a number of things that suit a qualitative research approach. So this is one method. Okay, I think this is really good, because it saves us a lot of trouble with the students. The second one that I found, which I think is also quite nice, is that, what do you do when you have questions? So this person said, so you can start with, let's say, for example, that, your student is interested in a social issue, which is related to brand stand. How do you, every time Israel bomb Palestine, we decide that we will not buy McDonald's or Starbucks. All right, then when that die off, we go back to our McDonald's and our Starbucks. So maybe one of the issues that we are interested in is about social distancing. Okay, social distancing with regard to consumerism. All right. Why do customers differ in their love towards brands based on their stance on social distancing? So you come up with a concept first, all right? And then you find what are the theories that are related to this issue, okay? A third example that I found is also very nice, about how they develop, from the concepts that they're interested in, and then how they develop the theoretical framework from it. So this is the, I give you the URLs that you can view them later. So in this example, is about media. It's about news. I was very happy to see this, because as an undergraduate, I did journalism, so I could understand this a little bit. So this person is interested in gatekeeping, news selection, and reportage of world news. So basically, I think we can start with reportage of world news. We want to see what kind of world news are being reported, okay, in prime time newscast and in dailies. All right. So, and this person was thinking that, you know, maybe let's look at how gatekeeping and news selection actually are related to this. So the first one theory that could be useful is looking at the media organization itself. All right. So looking at the media organization would be looking at media organization, selection, and production based on McQuail's theory on media as an institution. So in this theory, it talks about the different pressures on a media organization. So what are the different pressures? The bias of the owners, the advertisers, the political pressure, the government, you know, advocacy groups, the NGOs, the audience, and so on and so forth. And these are the people who actually have put pressure on the media organization in the selection of what kind of news they are going to report. So this is a basic theory number one. So the basic theory number two is about gatekeeping. All right. So this one talk about how news are evaluated and what kind of values are placed on certain types of news, and that would result in them being reported. Okay, so this is a theory number two. And the next theory is about agenda setting. Okay, so it says that the theory of agenda setting says that the issues that are given most attention by any press, that is the most important issue. So when the person combines these different theories, the media organization theory, the selective gatekeeping, agenda setting, and so on, and how this actually influence the media content. So the student has an integrated theoretical framework because it uses not one theory, but a combination of a number of theories to explain the relationship, how media content is being selected. Okay. So then from all these theories, you can come up with a conceptual framework about how the reporting of events are actually determined by the media organization, pressures and constraints on the media organization, and the news values. Okay, so from here, we can also show our students that, okay, now this is the basic thing that we have gotten, but maybe we are also interested to look at justice, you know, because it's possible that the media organization, despite the pressures and the constraints, have a sense of justice, what they think about justice. And based on this, then also the selective reporting would be affected, will be influenced. So then we can put another variable in, which is justice, and then think about how to operationalize this particular concept or construct so that it can be measured, and therefore we can test this particular model. Okay, so this is, I think, a third way that we can help our students to teach them how to construct the theoretical framework, and then come up with a conceptual framework, and finally come up with the variables that they are interested to test in their research work. Okay. I think in the sciences also, you know, there are, you know, you also test theoretical frameworks. Giving you two examples in work that I have worked with my partners. Okay, one is about zinc content in cord blood, okay, which is related to maternal age and parity. So what we did was that we tested a model to see how much zinc actually influence the expression of metallothionein and T2A. And this is a possible explanation about the process. Okay, and this is an estimate based on the data, the empirical data that have been collected. Another example is a quality of life model. Normally, quality of life is seen as a general factor with 4 different domains, which is the physical well-being, emotional well-being, functional well-being, and social well-being. And we thought that perhaps the relationship between these domains could be somewhat different, and therefore we tested this relationship. So I think by exposing our students with these different types of models, it would help them to have a better understanding about how to develop a theoretical framework for their study. So I think that's all that I have for now. I'm sorry that I did not give you any opportunity to ask me questions. What do you call that? In my presentation, and I'm not sure whether I was going very fast. But if you have any questions, any point of view that you like to share with me. Because I see that some of the people, some of the names here are people who've been, been with us and been teaching for quite some time. I feel a bit shy, sharing my ideas. Any questions? Any comments?
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam warahmatullah.
How are you, Professor Noor? Thank you very much for.
Oh, thank you. We've lost you, yeah.
I should start my video. Assalamu alaikum. Here I am. I was prompted by the host. I actually wanted to thank you very much for the elaborate and detailed explanation about doing research and guiding students. I wanted to ask actually a question related to, like, when we are needing to guide students in their proposal, their research, frequently in different kulliyas, especially when it goes to topics of qualitative nature, but even in quantitative nature, there may be like globally differences in the required structure of a proposal. So there are certain standards that, let's say, university was following, and there are standards that in the world, it's simply like established, but then that one is always changing. And there's a tendency of many experienced senior professors to permit, different structures and of the literature review, or even combining the literature review with the first chapter, which is the introductory chapter, with all the objectives and so on. So what's your view on that? I mean, how should we deal with these kind of challenges? I think that is something.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Doctor, which kuliah are you with?
I'm in Kuliah Economics,
Okay, all
Management,
right.
Department of Economics.
Okay. So it's always this is something that we as lecturers and examiners struggle with, right? I mean, you can read a very nice qualitative piece of work, and then suddenly, one examiner gives it a minor correction, another examiner gives it a major correction, and another examiner requests for a resubmission. Something like that can happen. And normally, something like this happens to a qualitative piece of work rather than a quantitative, because I think the interpretation is, how people do things are maybe quite different. Recently, my student had a viva voce, and one of the things that the examiner asked was that, can you write in the first person? Because the idea is that it's a mixed method study, and the student decided to write in the first person, and I thought that I shall give the student that freedom, because there are many qualitative research that are narrative based. They're written in the first person. So what does it matter if it is in the first person or the third person, right? I mean, it has to do with the whether the theories that he has used are compatible with whatever that he's studying, whether he has chosen the right methodology, whether he has chosen the right instrument, and whether he has operationalized them in the right way. So whether it's going to be in a first person or third person, I mean, to me, It's a freedom that you give to the student. And what happens is that the chairman said that normally we use the third person. So I think for nothing, my student now has to revise his writing from first person to the third person. So of course, you know, I mean, I normally in most circumstances, my student would write it in a third person. But this student, you know, because he was more like a participant in a situation of a participant observer, you know, because he's doing something about co-training, and he's a trainer himself. So if he wants to write it in a first person, you know, so what's wrong with that? You know, because I think what we need to evaluate would be the methods, the, you know, viability of the research and so on. So coming back to your question about, you know, about the
The structure.
about the structure. Okay.
Yeah.
I think number one, what I normally say is that follow your institution, you know, because your institution has some guidelines and the examiners are given that guideline, even though the guideline is actually very skimpy. You know, as an examiner, we get some sort of guideline, you know, about how to evaluate the thesis, but we actually don't have a full version about what should be in the introduction, in the introductory chapter, what should be in the literature review and so on. But I think we should not, you know, these are very, very trivial matters. You know, these are very trivial matters, right? I mean, why are we so hung up about these things, right? As long as in the, you know, you must have the theoretical framework in the first chapter. Sometimes you read a piece of work and you feel that this theoretical framework just don't fit in there very nicely. Sometimes you feel that the theoretical framework should be a chapter on its own, because there's so many complex variables that you're talking about and you need to explain, you know? So it's not like they have to fit, but the thing is that every institution has its own, you know, way of doing things. Say for example, University of Malaya, you know, I have some students from University of Malaya. They ask me for their theoretical framework and conceptual framework. For my conceptual framework, should I include the theories in the diagram, or should I just put in my variables that I'm interested in, you know? So what I tell them is that check with your institution, with your faculty, and then you use the conventions. But I find that qualitative tend to open itself up a lot more on this kind of issues, you know. That's what I think. I think the more my students go for Viva, the more the more worried I am about what an examiner is going to say, you know, because the thing is like this. Sometimes you find that research is already adequate. It talks about the relevant theories, it talks about the relevant concepts, it has reviewed the literature and so on and so forth. And examiner seems to think that, oh, you should add more, you know, you should add a bit of this, you should add a bit of that. Of course, you know, perfection is a dynamic target. It moves, right? I mean, how we should evaluate is that whether that thesis is sound in itself. Does it cover all the relevant things that it has to cover? And I think also sometimes students are afraid to defend their position. You know, say for example, like my student, he said that, you know, some of your references are a bit outdated. the reason why his references are outdated is that because not much has been done in that area. And what he's looking at are concepts that are related in that area that was done before. So I was a bit frustrated that he did not explain it, because I know that students will try to look for, the latest citations and the latest findings and so on. And we as supervisors, we also tell that to our students, right? So it doesn't mean that when a student have that kind of literature, it doesn't mean that the student has not thought enough or has not done his job well. So how many students have you supervised or you're going to supervise, Doctor?
Well, so far for me, there are none, but there may be some coming. So I just joined recently the Kuliah and university. So for that reason, I'm just asking, this is a question that always comes, to students, and they are needing to revise. And sometimes, usually I perceive that it's the supervisors who will guide them. But then, as you mentioned, examiners may be questioning why is it structured in this way or that way. So yeah, perhaps it can just be briefly explained, but some may be very rigid and strict in terms of the structure, and that is where, they may even demand that the candidate needs to send back the thesis for them to review whether they have really done it, and then they really have to do it. Although generally in the world, the structure is becoming more flexible, but what matters is the content, the message, and even the skill the student has acquired, and the depth and scope.
Because at the end of it, like my student, both examiners agreed that it's an original, it has a lot of novelty, it would have a big impact. But all those other comments, it really frustrates me. There's one question here. A theoretical and conceptual framework a must for all kinds of studies? I think, my point of view is that I'm a quantitative person. I'm highly quantitative, and therefore the kind of research that my students do have both. One is the theoretical framework and the other one is the conceptual framework, because the positivist research paradigm starts with a theory and it seeks to find one single truth. So it has both, the theoretical and the conceptual framework. But as I mentioned, for a qualitative, I think the conceptual comes first and the theoretical comes later through the grounded theory, right? That's what I've been made to understand. I've so far I've only evaluated 2 qualitative research, and I have never supervised a purely qualitative research because I think I will be out of my depth. But I think that's what I've read and what people have said. So it depends, but I think, anything that because the contribution of the research. So I think to come up with a practical contribution is quite easy, but to come up with a something that would extend the theoretical aspects of it, theory and things like that, is something which is not as easily achieved. And I think at the PhD level of study, we are trying to address the theoretical gaps, or the knowledge gap, things which are more meaningful rather than some practical matters that we are trying to resolve. Any other questions? I hope I have answered your question, Dr. Jasmine. Anyone would like to share your thoughts? would you be interested to have go through a course on philosophy? You know, to understand philosophy on paradigms. I think our students at IIUM, the bachelor program, they take one course on Islamic worldview. And in that course for Islamic worldview, they are taught about, you know, about these branches of philosophy, as I mentioned earlier. But I'm not quite sure about, you know, our PhD or master students coming from other institutions. But I think most institutions do teach logic. Okay, they do teach logic, and logic is nested within philosophy. So I would assume that they would have some sort of background in philosophy. But in many in many what do you call that, many research methods course, they don't really focus on research paradigms. But I think the research paradigm is important because depending on the paradigm, you would take on a different flavor, you know, of the kind of research that you're doing. Dr. Yana, which approach, Dr. Yana, applicable to all types of studies? Any questions? I think you all must be tired. You have attended from morning. And you have another one tomorrow. Yes, the conceptual and theoretical framework. Normally in the quantitative study, in social sciences, or humanities, we do have the theoretical framework first. Okay, so what students do is that what we require them to do is to talk about the concepts first, define the concepts, who are the proponents of those concepts, and then they have to describe those concepts within any theory that has been proposed. And then, so that would be the theoretical framework. And then if they are utilizing more than one theory to explain any particular concepts, then they move towards the conceptual framework, because the conceptual framework is the framework that describe how the variables in their studies are actually connected, and what sort of relationships are they trying to test. Okay, so the conceptual framework does that. So that's why without the conceptual framework, then we are not able to see how the concepts or variables are related, and what sort of relationships are being tested. So that's why we have both the theory and the theoretical framework, and also the conceptual framework, because the theoretical framework sets the scene for the to how to understand those concepts, you know, because theories normally explain the concepts, the phenomenon, and sometimes also explain how they are related to other concepts or other phenomenon. But I'm not what about pragmatism? Okay. Pragmatism, I think what do you call it? We are said that, you know, human beings are pragmatic creatures, right? Okay, so I think it depends on actually, when you talk about positivism, you're talking about one single truth. Okay, talking about one single truth. There is only one way to look at things. So say, for example, if you conduct an experiment and you have a definite one particular outcome, right? So based on that outcome, that is the truth that you are seeking. But interpretivism is something where you truth actually has multiple there are multiple truth, and truth resides in different groups of people. Okay, different people have different realities. So I think if you look at pragmatism, what can be seen as pragmatic for one group, or practical for some group, may not be, practical for another group. So I'm not sure whether it's a combination of positivism and interpretism, all right, because different people have made different classifications. I'm not quite sure who came with the classification first, so I'm not quite sure, whether it's a combination. But when you identify your research paradigm, now the readers would be able to know whether you are taking what stance you are taking, because we know that all forms of research have some sort of biasness. So if you take a positivist approach, you have that biasness towards one single truth, which you hope to explain. And if you go for interpretivism, then of course that you're not interested in, you think that there are more than one reality out there. There's not one single truth. So identifying the research paradigm is actually very important for people to make sense of why you have chosen a particular methodology, what methods you have used, and how you collect your data, and how you make sense of that data. So without that research paradigm, you're not quite sure what is your point of view, what is your worldview. So this is why, in my sharing session today, when I talk about the theoretical framework, I started with the branches of philosophy, with the worldview first, and then going towards the research paradigm, and then how that then will influence what kind of theory that you choose, to explain the concepts that you're interested in, and what kind of methodology that you're going to apply. I think probably this is something that not many students understand, because when I was studying, I was struggling with this as well, and I couldn't find, during my time, I suppose there were no YouTubes, and, so I really struggled with the readings that I had to read to understand these things. But I think it's important for us so that our students understand. So maybe you're not the best person to explain it, but maybe you can find some good videos or something like that you find would provide a clear understanding about these things, so that you don't have to struggle with it. Now, as a supervisor, it's not our responsibility to tell them what kind of theories they have to use. It's just that as an Islamic institution, our responsibility is to tell them that whatever that you're doing, let it not be inconsistent with the Islamic Sharia. Right? Because that's our responsibility. It cannot go against Allah SWT. So for us, that's what it is. Right? But other than that, any theory, as long as you don't use Darwinism theory to explain human development or something like that, it should be okay. And our task as supervisors is actually to see that, okay, given the worldview that we have they selected and the concepts, you know? Let's say if someone wants to talk about LGBT. So if you're talking about how LGBT is you know, is destroying the destroying the human life or whatever it is, then it's consistent with our worldview. But if you say that LGBT is a good alternative, then you know, so our responsibility is to guide our students to go in the right direction. But it's up to them to it's their responsibility to look at, you know, things that they want to investigate as part of their research, part of their learning. Okay. If I think Sister Damia, oh, thank you so much. Please make dua that I recover. I've been sick since Saturday, you know. I'm getting a bit worried already. So Sister Damia, if no more questions and no comments, I think maybe we can get them, let the lecturers rest before their next session tomorrow.
Okay, Prof, we would like to open to the any questions from the supervisors. You can unmute yourself and try to ask a question to the Prof directly.
Thank you
Or
very
maybe
much.
you can just put in the chat box.
Do you find, I'll ask you a question. Do you find my explanation and my slides helpful?
Yes, helpful. Thank you, Prof.
You're welcome. I will give it to Sister Damia. I'll
Inshallah.
give the PowerPoint slides. What you can do is that if you improve it, I hope you will share with me if you improve it on it. If you think there's something wrong with it, or you know, you add some more examples, so please share with me, because I've used the slide with my PhD students, and they thought that it is useful. So you're most welcome to have those slides. And if you see anything which is incorrect there, you just let me know so that I can correct it.
So any questions from the floor, from the supervisor? So Prof, I think there's one in the chat box from Arbaiah Reza. Salam Prof, what about pragmatism?
Oh,
Is
yeah.
it a research paradigm?
This one I've answered.
Okay, sorry.
But I'm not. I told Dr. Arbaya that you know, I'm not quite sure whether it's a combination of these two. Because there's so many different typology, you know, different classification of these things. So this is why I think when we ask our students to select a research paradigm, they have to make sure that they use really good sources, really good sources as a citation. I think semua orang dah penat dah, Mia.
Okay, no problem. So okay, I think thank you everybody. Thank you, Prof. Nolide, for the very insightful presentation and sharing. So inshallah, hopefully it will be benefit to all the supervisors. So inshallah, Prof, with that, I would like to close today's session. We will CPS and the organizing team would like to say thank you to Prof. Hopefully you can join us again for another training, inshallah. So with that, I would like to close the invitation. I would like to close the workshop, the training. Thank you so much, Prof. Nuruddin. Thank you so much for participant. Inshallah, we will meet again tomorrow same time, same platform. We're gonna use the Zoom link, the same Zoom link. So inshallah, don't forget to join us again back tomorrow. With that, we will close our training for today with Tazrih Kafara and Surah Al-As.
I've put the PowerPoint in the chat box. It seems to go. If you just try and see if it can be downloaded.
Yes, Prof. Ada. Thank you,
Ada kan?
Prof.
You're
Ada.
welcome. Okay.
Thank you. So
Assalamualaikum.
everyone, you can download the slide, yeah?
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Prof.
much.
Thank you,
You're
Prof.
welcome. Thank you for the doa.
Thank you.